We are sitting here 6 a.m. bright and early. We got up this morning and we've got an internal episode for you guys. We're going to be trying some new ideas out. We wanted to kind of come together and think about how can we engage our audience? How can we talk to you guys? Let y'all get to know us a little bit, but also just kind of like tell y'all what's going on. And we've got a new idea for kind of the format of this episode. Still playing with the name, right, Kyle?
Yeah, we haven't landed on a name.
We haven't landed on a name. Right now we're talking like we're thinking Learn the Ozarks is kind of what we're wanting to do because it's what we want to get people to go out and do is get outside
and learn the Ozarks. Learn what we love.
And you want to like just tell people a little bit like how we're thinking about it maybe.
Yeah, I'll give you like the 30,000 foot view for Learn the Ozarks. And before you tune out, I do just want to cast some vision for it. So Learn the Ozarks, at least if that's what we're going to call it, because it could change.
You
know, we're
I like
just
it
rolling
though.
with it.
I like it.
I do too, but it's early and we decided on it this morning.
Yeah.
So
if y'all have if once we get through this, if y'all have an idea for a better name or something that you would think would be cooler, let us know. We're always open to new ideas.
I agree. Anyway, Learn the Ozarks is not a deep dive with a specialized guest like we normally have for you guys. Instead, we're thinking Learn the Ozarks will be just, I don't know, phenomenal sounds like a really extreme word, but a really decent place for old Ozarkians.
Hopefully.
And new Ozarkians, people who are maybe moving to the area, trying to figure out what is going on around here, to be refreshed on the outdoor basics of hunting and fishing and camping and floating and cool history or whatever else. And so really, at least in my head, it's a place to let our nerdiness shine through a little bit.
Yeah.
As we gain knowledge and experience and tell stories and all of that kind of stuff. So we won't do a ton of these episodes, I don't think, but we'd love to cover some history of the Ozarks, maybe some folklore down the road. But certainly we want to share the best parts of our region that we just really love that may go unnoticed or untalked about. So
yeah,
that's kind of what we're thinking.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. I think it'll be fun, a good time to just hang out a little bit, talk to the listeners, also learn. Like we had some ideas for an episode that was, a long time ago. We heard about the Ozark Hellbender,
which I had never heard of before,
aka
until somebody
the
mentioned
Snot Otter,
Mm-hmm.
or there were a few other like insane nicknames.
But it's just a huge salamander, right?
It's a huge salamander that's like native to the area. But like just to even do a deep dive on that, or some like Ozark folklore, like you were mentioning, some myths and legends and stuff like that would be cool to dive into. So
I agree. I mean, I don't know much about Ozark folklore, but
I don't either.
I think it'd be fun to break the mold a little bit.
Yeah.
Just as we talk about the area of the world that we love so much. So
yeah, absolutely. So it'll be cool. We're going to talk about a topic that is super relevant for the next couple of months. But before we get to that, housekeeping, I want to just thank the listeners for sticking with us. I know we took a break through kind of the holiday season, and just life stuff, stuff happened. I had a baby. We were super busy. The holidays, you're trying to spend time with family.
And to be honest, we thought we'd lose all of you guys.
We thought we'd lose you guys.
Which was scary.
But, over the last couple of weeks, we've released a few episodes, and you guys are still there. You guys are still listening, and in full force, pretty much picked up right where we left off. So huge thanks to you guys. And you guys know this, the Spotify rap notes, they always like give you some statistics. I always think it's super interesting to hear like what kind of numbers or statistics on podcasts that I listen to. So I wanted to give you guys like a few things that I thought were super interesting. And again, thank you guys for the help, because we obviously wouldn't have these stats without you guys. So one of them, Kyle, did you know that we are in the top 10% of most followed podcasts globally?
I did as of 2 minutes ago because we were talking.
You did know.
Good teaser though.
Good teaser. Yeah. So top 10% most followed podcasts. Another stat that I thought was really cool is we are a top 10 podcast for 439 different people. So 439 different people were in their top 10 podcasts.
How does it track that?
I don't know.
I guess just all big like podcast platforms.
I have no idea.
Interesting. Didn't know that one.
So top 10 for 439. We're a top 5 podcast for 286 people.
Okay.
So 286 people were in their top 5 rotation of podcasts. And then we are the number 1 podcast for roughly about 100 people.
Me being one of them.
Maybe so. It's you, it's me, it's Daniel,
and then
it's
97 others.
97 other people. And then so that's awesome. Just the fact that 100 people are like, yeah, that's my number one podcast, my go-to every time. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I did not realize that either.
And then this is the biggest thing, because we are such a niche podcast and we're localized and we're just specifically talking about the Ozarks. The best way that we can grow and the way that we've noticed growth is by people sharing episodes. So huge thank you to you guys for sharing episodes. This other stat that I've got here says our podcast was in the top 5% most shared podcast globally. So people are sending it. They're sending it on email. They're sharing it on Facebook, social media. They're texting it. I've got this kind of like chart here that shows these different graphs of like how people are sharing. So
I guess the call to action then is please keep doing that.
Keep sharing. That helps. Like
please keep that up.
That helps us grow. If you like the show, that's the best way to help us grow and continue to make cool episodes and get ideas and have listeners. So
yeah, I mean, we realize we're probably not going to be super relevant to some guy out in California or out in New York or whatever else.
Nor do I want to be.
Fair. I mean, yeah, we're talking about the Ozarks, like the area that we grew up in and we love, and so that is super exciting. That's how we've grown, is actually through just the network of people in the area who see what we're doing is at least valuable to their week and to their life. And I'm not saying it's like the most important thing, but at least it's a part. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, dude. I love it, man. I love that y'all are following along. So anyways, so there's that. And then real quick, before we get to anything else, quick reminder, this weekend, March 4th, is Black Bear Bonanza. And that's put on through BHA. If you don't know what that is, go back and listen to our episode with James Brandenburg of BHA. He talks about that.
It's at the Bentonville Quail Barn.
Benton County Quail Barn. Should be a super cool event. Clay Newcomb's going to be there. Myron Means is going to be there. Going to be all kinds of stuff. Bring the family, bring the kids. Should be a really cool event. So we'll see y'all there. We should just be kind of mingling around and checking it out, just like everybody else. So there's that. Now,
where are we headed for this episode?
We've got an episode we want to talk spring fishing with you guys.
Super broad.
It's
going to be awesome.
We're going to cover a lot, and hopefully you guys may or may not learn a ton. You may learn a lot if you've never spent a whole lot of time fishing in the spring. Some of you may already know some of this stuff, but we're going to kind of use this to kick off a challenge, like I mentioned at the beginning, and it's going to be something that I think will be fun for everybody. It'll be a way for us to kind of see what y'all are doing, see who's listening, who's following along, and it'll basically be something that we'll try to do every month. And every time we do one of these internal episodes, we will have a winner. We'll kind of announce them. We'll post pictures on Instagram. We'll do a shout out on the podcast or on a guest podcast. Send you a free sticker. We're going to do some stuff to kind of incentivize, like, hey, let's do this challenge and see what you guys are doing out there. So I'll leave it there, and then maybe we say what the challenge is at the end of the episode.
I think that's a fine idea.
All right, let's do it. So let's get into it then. What do we want to cover with the spring fishing?
I think like we said, not a deep dive. I want to cover maybe a large variety of target species in our area, and then give you guys enough information as far as like locations, tactics, patterns, water, gear, types of fish, all of that kind of stuff for spring fishing in the Ozarks. And so the way I structured this as I was writing it out was mostly fly fishing.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm most comfortable with. If you are a traditional, conventional fisherman, you don't use the fly rod, I would say don't tune out, because I imagine at least the tactics and maybe some of the patterns will still be relevant to your fishing experience.
And I'm gonna talk a few spin rod tactics.
I think
too,
you should,
because I am not exclusively a fly angler. I'm not either. Fly fishing.
I've just got more comfortable with the fly rod.
Absolutely, but there are certain situations where I'm picking up a spin rod, because when you get tucked into some of these backwater creeks in the Ozarks and you don't have a lot of room to backcast, there's no substitute for a little spin rod.
Especially if you're fishing out of a kayak or a canoe or something like that too, where even casting gets difficult.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it.
Spinning around the river in 360. And
so to break this down, here's what we're thinking. We'll start with the species.
So we're going to go species by species?
Yep.
Okay.
Species by species. We'll start with trout. Then we'll do the where for trout, the how, and then maybe the gear. And trout will be, I guess, the first one because we know trout the best. We're going to do the how and the where kind of lumped in together.
Okay.
The other species will just be generalized how, a few of the best spots is to the where, and then some of the gear needed. So
Okay.
I think that's what we're thinking. Does that sound good?
Yeah. No, that sounds great.
I like it.
So fish by fish, we'll talk through some general tactics and gear you need,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll go to the next one.
Perfect. So without further ado,
So trout.
this is
How the heck do you catch a trout, and where do you find them?
Fishing for Trout in the Spring, Learn the Ozarks, Chapter 1.
Ooh.
All right, where do you catch trout? The White River below Bull Shoals, the Norfolk River, the White River below Beaver, the Little Red River, and the Spring River. The thing about all these waters is it's best to know what type of water you're going to be fishing in to determine how to fish it, especially in the spring, with
Okay.
water runoff, generation schedules, all of that kind of stuff. So to kick us off, we'll go White River. In my personal opinion, the White River below Bull Shoals is A, the most fun place in the world to fish. B, you need a boat. So tactic number one,
You pretty much got to have a boat.
pretty much need a boat. They might be doing low flow, and you can manage in waders. We see plenty of people do it. That's how we started out. But if you're going to fish it in the spring, it's best if you don't have a boat to probably get a guide or rent a boat. You can rent them for pretty cheap. Different spots around there. Riley's is one that we've done.
Yeah, Riley's
It's like
Outfitters,
$25 a day for a boat.
where I did my bachelor party.
That's right. That was fun.
Super cool. And yeah, like you can basically just go get a boat and go out there by yourself if you don't have one,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll just let you use his boat for the day.
Yeah. So that's a good, great tactic out there on the white. My favorite setup for the white is the classic 9-foot 5-weight rod. A 6-weight rod is also good if you're throwing something a little bit heavier. You can obviously always go bigger and heavier. Throw the 8-weight if you're going to do streamers, that kind of thing.
Why do you need the different rods?
Like if
Why choose
for
one
your
over
setup?
the other? Yeah.
Oh, that's a good thought. The 9-foot 5-weight is best for small nymph patterns, dry flies, whatever the hatch may be. Not super heavy.
Yeah.
You're not throwing heavy line. The 8-weight's going to be best used for a sinking line if the water's really high and you want to go the streamer game, or if you're just throwing bigger patterns.
Okay.
It's going to be hard to throw an articulated streamer out of a 5-weight rod.
Yeah.
It's just too heavy.
Yeah.
But my favorite for the spring is the 9-foot 5-weight. And I love doing like a double nymph rig, whatever's hatching. It's probably a bunch of emergers at this point. And so different bugs that are hatching off the gravel bed as the water warms up through the sunlight hitting it, that kind of stuff. And that's what the trout are just gorging themselves on. Also in the spring, as water runs off through the hills, you're going to get worms and caterpillars and whatever else junk kind of comes through the forest floor and is spit out into the rivers, and the trout are just gorging themselves on all
chubby.
of that kind of stuff.
We like some chubby trout.
We do. And so, yeah, think like size 18 or 20, ruby midges, root beer midges, zebra midges, San Juan worms, eggs are good, scud, any type of scud patterns. Naturally, we love fishing the jigs. Those emulate multiple different species. I'm not super sure, and I don't know if anybody can tell us exactly what they do or what they're supposed to look like.
Yeah, I remember
But they're fishy.
If we think back to we talked to Pam and Jim Hall, who came up with the PJ's finesse marabou jig. He was talking about how, don't really know what it emulates, but just the way those feathers kind of like undulate under the water. That was the word he used.
It was.
It's a good word. That's like, it just totally sets them off. And they're like, I got to eat that. That's buggy. That's buggy AF.
That's a sticker if I've ever seen one.
Buggy AF. So, but the point I want to make, we just named a bunch of flies, right? If you ever don't know, like every day can be different, and it kind of helps to like be in the know. If you ever don't know, just go to a fly shop.
Definitely.
Just ask them like what's working right now, because you can go out there with a fly box of 100 different flies and be like, gosh, I don't really want to work through every single one of these. But always ask a fly shop what's going on right now.
If it was me for the month of March on the white, I'd be in a boat. I would have a 9-foot 5-weight rod with a floating line. I would have maybe an 8-foot long leader, tapered down to 5X, and then 5X tippet that adds another 2 or 3 feet to my leader. I'd put an indicator, depending on flows, probably about 7, 8 feet high.
Yeah.
And then at the first tippet, I would tie on a 1/125th ounce or a 1/4 ounce, either white or peach and olive jig, marabou jig. And then I'd tie another piece of 5X tippet off the bend of the hook about a foot. And I would tie on a San Juan worm or a root beer midge or a scud pattern or a Dalley's tailwater jig, which isn't technically a jig, just has a jig hook. Those are
love
great.
that fly.
And I would get on the front of the boat and I would cast it, downstream at the riffle line, let it float like crazy, and just pull in fish after fish.
Oh, yeah.
That's my high level view. If I was going to the white tomorrow, that's what I'd do.
Got it. Love it. I love it. So there's trout, and that was specifically the white.
Mm-hmm. Other tactics will work other places too.
Yeah.
We can just touch briefly on the Norfolk and the beaver tail water.
Yeah, I mean, you can't mention trout in the Ozarks without mentioning a few of the other places. You've got the Norfolk, you've got the beaver tail water, you've got the Little Red. I'm not going to go through specific tactics on each of those, but similar to what you said, and I'll reiterate again, when you're going to different places, it's never a bad idea to start with the fly shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, go ask them what's been working, what's hot right now. But they're each unique in their own way. The Little Red I really like. We went there after we graduated. We did like a week-long trip, and we just hopped from different tailwater to different tailwater, and we traveled all around the state. Awesome time. But I was so surprised by how going from like the white one day to like the Little Red and then up to the Norfolk, how much it changed day to day. Like, I feel like we fished a lot of scuds and sow bugs down on the Little Red, and that's like the only thing we were catching them on that day. And then some people were throwing like soft hackles and stuff like that. And so my point is, go to the fly shop, just ask them what they're doing. But each one of those is so unique. I love the Little Red because it's different, and it's like, to me, it feels a little bit more wild. I don't know why, but just the feeling that I get when I'm down there.
It's because the trees touch at the top.
Yeah.
Like in a
there's
canopy.
that canopy. And
beautiful.
We saw some like barn owls out there, and there were like some ducks flying through, and there were, deer on the side of the banks and stuff like that. So I always like that down there. So
I think we should touch on the beaver tail water because it is, in the spring at least, the wade fisherman's paradise.
Okay.
So if you don't have a boat or don't have access to one, you're like, great, if that's the bar to entry, I can't go fishing.
Yeah.
The beaver tail water is special. So I'll let you explain how to catch fish out there because we've done it plenty of times.
Yes.
But before we go there, the beaver tail water, if you're going to fish it, learn how to read the generation schedule, and go when they are not generating, and it will feel less like a tailwater and more like a really long and skinny pond.
Yes.
Which, if you're new to fly fishing or you want to take your kids, or you just want an easy day on the water, you'll be catching stalker rainbows all day long. Maybe a nice brown if you get out there early enough, but you can catch a serious amount of fish in the spring on the beaver tail water. So how would you fish it?
Yeah. So, totally agree.
Without spot burning, how would you fish it?
Yes, totally agree. Don't want to burn spots. But it is, I will reiterate, like, I've probably taken, just to the beaver tail waters, probably 4 or 5 different people who have never fly fished before, just to learn and catch their first fish on a fly rod. Just last weekend, I took my buddy, who has never fly fished before, grew up bass fishing. He's like, I just don't think I'm going to have the finesse for a fly rod. I took him out there. He caught his limit of fish. I'd taken my dad out there. That's where I taught my wife how to fly fish.
Same.
We've taken several buddies out there and just showed them how to get on some fish. Actually, now that I say
Daniel's laughing
I
at
took
us.
Daniel out there one time to teach him, and he didn't catch a single thing. He may be the worst fisherman of all time.
But you're a fantastic podcast producer, Dan.
But we love you anyways, Dan. But yeah, it's a great spot to learn. So if I was going out there, and the way that I've done it in the past is learn the water, know the generation schedule, just blatantly honest. I know you can catch them when they're generating, but if you're going to wade, what we've seen is when that water hits 916, and you look online and you can just type in Beaver Lake tailwater level, look it up. 916 is, I have to assume that's elevation from sea level, right? Because it's not 916 feet deep.
Right.
But when it gets to 916, that's kind of the perfect level to go out there. So go out there on days like that, read the generation, and then depending on where you're at, know the depth of the water as best you can. But the way that we've got it done is super simple. I usually just do one fly at a time. I really don't mess with the double nymph rig or anything like that. I'm usually not fishing top water. It's usually a ruby midge, a root beer midge, or one of those marabou jigs, and it's what 1/125th
Yep.
ounce, super small,
Fishing
super
like
tiny.
6 feet deep,
Fishing like 6
just
feet
off
deep,
a pulsa indicator or something like
under an
that.
indicator, or a bobber, as people may or may not like to call it. That's what it is.
That's what it looks like. It's how it functions.
And all day long, like I'm, find the spot where it's moving a little bit across,
It's a little bit deep.
a way to tell like where the water's moving, because like you said, it can be still as all get out. Cast across the water, see where your line bends, and then fish that middle section where your line has been in the most, just to get a little bit of movement to let that fly under the water kind of bounce along the rocks. But yeah, that's all I would do.
If you want to learn how to fish for trout in the spring, the beaver tail water is a great bet. And it's also, I feel like that's where I learned not to leave fish to find fish. Like if you're not catching fish in a spot, move. But if you're catching fish, it's such a small tail water. They're all piled up in there.
Yeah.
Like they're right there.
Oh, there's so many.
You can stand in one spot once you find them and catch fish after fish after fish after fish.
Yeah.
It's a great spot.
It's a great spot. So anyways, yeah, that's trout in a nutshell in the Ozarks. And probably, like you said, it's probably one of my favorites to go after, just because we are so comfortable in that realm. And it's easy to go catch them and take new people. And that's always fun to get people out and take them fly fishing for the first time. I will say, I want to talk conventional tackle real quick on that.
I love it.
And this is not, I'm going to preface this is not how you should catch them every time or whatever, but this is a way that I've done it in the past. And this is actually the first time I went trout fishing. This is how I caught them. We took a guide out there and we hooked up cooked shrimp from Walmart, put it on a hook with a little pink trout magnet pinky worm, and bounced it along the bottom with like a weight 2 feet up the line. Literally, you throw it out there, you float down the stream.
You just pull it along
in a boat, and it just bounces. Wait till you feel a tug, pull them in, and that's like if you don't know how to fly fish or you don't have a fly rod, like that's a super simple way to catch them. You don't even have to be in a boat. You could do it off the bank.
You can. We've done it,
and you can catch a lot of fish doing it that way too.
So your gear needed for trout, real quick: 9'5" weight rod, floating line, monofilament tapered leader, 5X and 6X tippet, monofilament or fluorocarbon, and then your assortment of flies. Go to a fly shop and say, "What is cooking?" And they'll hook you up.
What's cooking? Good looking. They might look at you weird if you say
I
that.
hope they don't say that at the fly shop.
All right, we killed trout. Let's move to the next one. What else?
White bass. Should we do that? It's always a heavy hitter in this area in the spring.
Got it. You can't talk spring fishing without talking white bass,
Which I learned recently is also called a sand bass.
AKA sand bass.
If you're weird and from not Arkansas.
Wow.
Just going to burn our Missouri friends. No, Oklahoma friends.
Oklahoma, Donovan.
Is that who it was?
He calls them, that was how we learned was he was
sand
saying
bass?
sand bass. And we're like, what
What is
sand bass?
that?
But we looked
Googled
it up.
It's a white bass.
It's just a slang. It's like a slang term.
I'm excited to go fishing with him.
Yeah, man.
I need him to teach me how to seriously catch these fish.
He's gonna be mad at you for
Donovan, I'm so sorry.
calling it a white bass. So how do you catch them? And why do you catch them in the spring?
You catch them in the spring because they come out of the lake and to spawn in the shallower and warmer rivers all throughout the Ozarks. How to catch them? That's a good question. We have not been the luckiest when it comes to catching them. We've caught a few.
We have tried really hard.
Yeah, and I feel like we just miss it on the timing. It could be just the old timers talking, but I feel like I grew up always hearing like, "Are the white bass running yet?" And it's like, "Oh, just another week." And then you wait, and it's like, "Oh, we missed them."
Yeah.
So I don't know how true that is.
Yeah.
And it could be that they used to be just thick as thieves in these rivers, and so it was easy to see them running, and now maybe they thinned out because of the introduction of walleye and that kind of stuff. But you go, I mean, I go to the Twin Bridges, like in Goshen.
Yeah.
That's the spot. That's what everybody talks about. Millwood Lake's another good one. Oriole Creek's a good one. Those are all good spots to go for them. Obviously, the Illinois River is good for them. I think minnows are the name of the game when it comes to the white bass.
Yeah.
And so they are looking to spawn, but they also need to eat. And so I've been known to catch them on small clouser patterns in white, marabou jigs as well off a floating line, stripped through like a streamer. You can drift big flies underneath an indicator through some of the deep holes for these white bass, and I think you can wade into the river or use a boat to get up into the deeper runs or where there may be less people on the White or the War Eagle creeks. And obviously, if you're going to be fishing a lake, you probably want to find a boat. But
Yeah.
I think any way that you would use to catch, or any tactics you'd use to catch a smallmouth or a largemouth, you could probably pare it down to be a little bit smaller and catch a white bass.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited to get out there and try it a little bit more this spring. I have not historically had a lot of success fishing white bass. Like you said, timing has been tricky.
Mm-hmm.
You get out there, I am very much a weekend warrior. I work during the week, and so my time is on the weekends. And if they're not hitting that day, then sometimes you're just out of luck.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to explore a little bit more. We're going fishing with Donovan, and hopefully we can kind of figure it out a little bit more. But yeah, that's one that I would love to be like, yeah, I know how to catch white bass, but I'm not going to lie to you guys and say that I do right now.
I feel like Steve Daly has a story. It may have been our first episode with him of coming up to Twin Bridges and learning some of the Arkansas waters by catching white bass.
Yeah.
And it was years ago when they were maybe thicker and more of them. But am I remembering that correctly? Or am I
feel like
making
he
that
mentioned
up?
something like that.
I think he did.
One way to know would be go back and listen to
Yeah,
Steve
and
Daly's
go do the same just to make sure we're not lying to you guys.
Okay, white bass, check. Are we good there?
I think so. I wish we had more, but we're learning too.
TBD.
So that's learn the Ozarks. That also applies to us.
Yep.
What's next for us, Kyle?
So let's do walleye.
Okay.
Let's talk walleye because super cool fish.
Mm-hmm.
They taste amazing.
And they're creepy looking.
They're creepy looking. They look like a prehistoric fish. Super weird, but they're big. They grow like long and skinny, so they're super cool to catch. They're not the hardest fighting fish. They fight hard initially, and then they kind of give up really quick. Like you're just pulling up a lot of weight.
It feels like you're catching a wet towel.
Yeah. So Dan Roberts said wet sock or something like that. It's like, oh man, I got something. You think you're snagged, and then it's like, oh
Nope,
wait,
it's a fish.
That's a fish. But man, what a unique fish. Super cool. We kind of lucked into these a couple years ago. We were actually, speaking of white bass, we were out there trying to catch white bass.
Ended up catching a whole mess of walleye.
Yeah, we were like, oh my gosh. And so we were on the White River, feeding into Beaver Lake, and I was out there catching them on a clouser, and it was a beat up old clouser too. It was one that I think used to be olive and white, and a lot of the olive had fallen off. And so it's a small little, I don't know, size 4 hook, maybe size 6 hook. And yeah, just kind of sparsely tied with some white deer hair. And I was just throwing it out there, kind of letting it drift, and then kind of sit at the end of my drift for a little bit in like a deep hole. And right at the end of that, once I'd let it sit, I'd feel a little tug. I'd pull up, and I mean, we were pulling them in left and right.
You mentioned the White River above Beaver Lake,
Yep,
not below. So not the tailwater.
not the tailwater,
Right.
where it pours into Beaver Lake.
So yeah, White River at Twin Bridges is another great spot. You can probably target both species if you want to make your way down there.
And I've never fished above really, I've never fished above any of the other lakes in the Ozarks. But I have to imagine that they're doing the same thing, right? Like if you were to go up into Missouri, into like above Table Rock, I know they're catching them up there right now. Seen pictures from some different people I follow on Instagram, but anywhere that they're going to be spawning and moving up into the channels, that's where you're gonna find them there.
I feel like they chase the white bass because they eat their eggs.
Yeah.
Or
Didn't
maybe
John
they
Stein
lead the
tell us
white
about
bass.
that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
As far as how to catch them, we always tie a non-slip loop knot, which is a fancy way of saying there's a loop that meets the fly in the line.
Yep.
So it just has more action through the water. I like fishing a size 2 lefty's deceiver, and it's traditionally a saltwater fly. But if you get a white one with like a red throat, I imagine it's mimicking a shad pattern or something like that is in the water at the time. Somebody who knows a lot more about what the fish are doing this time of year would know exactly why they're eating that. But that number 2 hook, white lefty's deceiver with some red or some sparkle, whatever you can find on it, is it just mimics a white minnow. And the white bass, they eat them, and then the walleye, they definitely eat them. And it could be mimicking a small white bass. Like that's also what they're eating. But I like the lefty deceiver. It's heavy enough to get into the deeper pockets, that kind of thing. And the pattern is long enough, like there's enough feather into your hair that it doesn't allow the fly to get just chomped up because they have teeth.
Yeah.
And so you can fish it for more than one walleye.
Right.
Which some other patterns, they just get destroyed. They get eaten up. So.
Yeah, like that Clouser I was talking about. Just totally got tore up. But I was still catching it. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
They loved it.
I was like, it didn't seem to throw them off too much.
And we traditionally cast our fly upstream with an 8-weight rod, like 10-foot intermediate sink line, just to get your depth down a little bit. And then we kind of let it swing through the water or through those deep pockets and strip it back to us. And then it's just a hook set, like a strip hook set.
Yeah.
And they eat them. So
boom,
it's fun.
And then we eat them.
And
don't forget about the cheek.
Eat the cheek.
Eat the cheek. Hashtag eat the cheek.
One thing on the walleye, you're going to need some thicker leaders or some thicker tippet. Don't go throw a 5X tippet at a walleye.
Yes.
He will munch through it very quickly.
Munch.
I'll go get some saltwater line or even some like 10-pound line off a spinning reel.
Beautiful.
Just tie it on his tippet.
Yeah, it's as easy as that. Okay, what's next? Let's talk bluegill.
Bluegill
and
crappie.
I'd say maybe bluegill paired with some red ear, some long ear, sunfish, green sunfish, kind of anything within that like creek, pond, brim type panfish.
Okay.
Anything in that I think is a good place to start. These suckers are everywhere, right? Like
literally everywhere.
Literally, you can go pretty much in any little backwater creek, back channel creek, or pond and find one of these types of species, and they're so fun to catch. And it's another great way to get someone who's never fly fished or thrown topwater or anything to catch these. It's a great way to get them into it. I love these fish. They're the long ear, especially the colors that they have on them. They're so unique. They almost look like they're from like the tropics of like the Caribbean. And it's a great fish to catch. You're going to find these literally anywhere. I mean, we wrote down a list of all these different places you can catch them, but to even go through, it's like 20.
We end with almost any pond or creek you can find.
Yeah, so just know that any warm water creek, these are going to be in there. The best way that I like going out there is a fly rod,
poppers,
top water,
grasshoppers,
small little hopper patterns, ant patterns, anything like that you're going to throw out there, sit on top of the water and just let it sit there. They're going to come up and they're going to smash it as hard as they can. Even if they're tiny, you're going to catch some fish on this thing because they're feisty, they're fun to catch, and it's a great springtime fish.
It feels like cheating, but you can also go to Walmart or any fly shop, or not even fly shop, just fishing store, and get like a crappie jig, and then take your boat out to Lake Fayetteville or to Lake Springdale or one of these little lakes that has crappie over brush.
Yep.
Find a nest of them, drop it in front of them, pull in crappie after crappie after crappie.
They're fun.
They're so fun.
They are so fun. Yeah. So
easiest fish in the Ozarks to catch.
Probably so.
Would be the bluegill, the long-eared sunfish, all those types of species.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Yeah, they're going to be hanging around docks. They're going to be hanging around sunken debris.
You can see them because they like the sun.
Trees, yeah. On a really clear, sunny day, you can see them through the water. So we did a video on YouTube, on our old YouTube, of going to buy like a Walmart rod, and it was like a $40 Ozark Trail Walmart rod, and then we bought like the $5 Walmart topwater cork poppers, and we went out there and we caught a bunch of them, like just to prove that you don't have to spend $150, $200 to like go catch fish on a fly rod. It's just you can do it super cheap and still have a good time.
Yeah, but they're fun. They're aggressive. I think your gear needed is your 9'5" weight, if you have one, some tippet, a little bit of split shot if you want to sink your flies faster, strike indicator if you're doing a crappie jig or a marabou jig or something like that, and then any tiny little popper, ant pattern, or grasshopper pattern or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next
is the largemouth. I think when many people think about fishing, maybe in Arkansas, not specifically the Ozarks, but at least southern Arkansas, they're thinking the largemouth bass. And this is a really, really fun fish to catch on a fly rod, or any conventional tackle. I mean, if you grew up fishing in the area, you probably know how to catch a largemouth on a spinning rod with a topwater spinner or a crankbait or a worm and a bobber.
Yeah.
Like you can just catch these fish. And so any of the lakes around here, like Ouachita, Millwood, Greers Ferry is good. Beaver is difficult because it's deep, but you can definitely catch them if you find some of the banks that are a little bit shallower. Lake Norfolk, Table Rock Lake, all the creeks.
Oh yeah.
Anything legal.
Yep.
Golf course ponds. They're there.
They're pretty much
They're
everywhere.
pretty much everywhere. If I'm gonna catch them, I remember that they like to blow up on bait, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can present a sloppy fly. Sometimes you can. They don't care. They'll eat pretty much anything. But I look for shadowed areas behind cover, sticking out from a log, something like that. I will cast a floating line, just letting it sink 2 or 3 feet deep with a heavy streamer on the back end. And I'm throwing little minnow patterns, Klausers, that kind of stuff, stripping it back to me. Different strip patterns. You go fast, slow, whatever you find the fish are going to work towards. Yeah. Then as soon as you find it, you don't change it. So if really slow is working that day, you do the same thing for every other spot. If really fast and aggressive is working that day, you do the same thing. So I think some of the largemouth, they love a really fast, aggressive fly and they want to chase it. And you'll even see them like chase it to you and then maybe veer away at the last minute because they see you standing in the water or on a boat or something like that. Some love a really dead, sickly looking streamer pattern in the water, and just kind of depending on what the weather's doing, cloud cover, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of you just kind of poke around, see what's working,
mess around, see what happens. It's a fun fish to catch. I mean, everybody knows largemouth. Like, they just fight hard. They're fun to catch. It's an awesome sport fish. Probably like the most iconic game fish in the state of Arkansas. That and probably the smallmouth, which is next on the list.
It is.
So
you want to send us out with the smallies?
Yes. So the smallmouth, we love the smallmouth. Most people who spend any bit of time fishing in the Ozarks, they chase these creatures
because they're awesome.
They are, in some circles, they are a symbol of the Ozarks. They're highly regarded. A lot of people who chase these are like catch and release only on smallmouth.
Which I would say do that.
Yeah, which is definitely, you're never going to go wrong. They're just a super cool fish. They fight hard. Again, they are in a lot of places. Some of the areas where people find them the most are, Crooked Creek, the Buffalo River, the Kings River, the Illinois, lots of different little spring creeks. I mean, there's some running through Northwest Arkansas.
Kings River is phenomenal.
Yep. That you can find them in. There are a lot of places. And usually what's kind of cool about these fish is usually they're in really, really pretty places. Like if you're looking for kind of that scenic, like, oh, I'm out in the woods and, I found this new spot and there's this little creek, you're going to find some smallmouth there. And they're around Chunk Rock in the water. They they tend to stay near where they can have some cover, hide around some big chunk rock and shade and stuff like that. You're going to find them up under logs and stuff like that. So awesome fish. If I'm going out there, I'm usually in the spring. The way that at least we've caught them, and I'm not going to say I'm not a smallmouth guide. I'm not a pro on this, but the way that we have caught them in these little backwater kind of spring creeks has been on articulated flies. The way that I've done it is I fish usually at like the bottom of a riffle. So I'll throw it into the riffle. I'll let my fly swing down. And somewhere in there, kind of towards the end of that, once that articulated fly kind of kicks and turns its tail and start to like pull on the line, that's usually where I catch them. And they bite on and they fight hard. And 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I caught one that was just like huge. I think it was like 18 or 19 inches in this back little spring creek that just was flowing through this little cow farm. And
we should throw that up on the Instagram.
It was awesome. Yeah, we should put that on the Instagram. But yeah, they're just a super fun fish. Lots of different ways to catch them. I know some people do top water for those. It just kind of depends. You can throw crawdads for them. Hellgrammites, they love hellgrammites. We were just talking with Donovan. He's big on bait fish over on the Illinois. Know your river, know what's going on, what they're eating, and you can't go wrong catching smallmouth.
Yeah, we've interviewed plenty of guys who are like smallmouth guys.
Yeah.
And they can really teach you how to catch the smallies.
Yeah. Tad 4.
His is great. Dwayne
Dwayne
Hayda.
Hayda.
He talks to smallies.
Donovan Clary.
We
Great episodes.
think anything that you can learn from them is going to help you catch smallmouth. If you want to go the lazy route, I've been known to put an articulated streamer under an indicator.
Yeah.
And drift them like a trout.
There you go.
And they'll eat them.
Yeah, they
and
will.
it's awesome.
Yes. And then one last thing on that. So another way to catch these not on a fly rod is put on a worm.
Mm-hmm.
Take a spin rod out there, put on a worm. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, sometimes you get in some situations where it's a small creek, you're in the bushes, you don't have a lot of room to back cast, and I would take a spin rod out there, and I usually do like a wacky rig black rubber worm, and I throw it out there into these little holes. I just work the way across. I'm wading. I love wet wading without waders. You're just in the warm water, and I've been out where I've had days where I'm catching like 10 smallmouth in an hour, and I'm just pulling them in left and right.
The wacky rig worm dropped into a deep hole is like almost a guarantee.
Oh, and it's so simple.
It's so simple.
It's easy to do.
They also have those PB&J worms. They're like the purple and brown.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
That would make sense. It's the color.
Yeah, purple.
You can put those
jelly and peanut butter.
on a big jig head, and kind of swim them through some riffles and stuff like that. And smallmouth, especially in the Kings, will just blow up on those things. We did I think we did a Father's Day trip a few years ago with my dad, and we were in kayaks, and that's all we did was the PB&J worm on the jig head. So it's got a weighted head. So when it swims, it dives and looks like, I guess, a swimming worm or a floating
you're just
worm.
kind of popping it every now and then.
And it's an easy way to catch smallmouth. You can get into some big fish that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great time. Okay, so we went through, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is not an exhaustive list.
Not even close.
Of everything you can catch or every way to catch them. And again, we're not trying to come across as we're the experts on any of this stuff. We're just telling you how we have caught them in the past and how we like to do it. There it is. Learn the Ozarks, part 1.
Sweet. Any closing thoughts?
No, man, I love it. I think we'll continue to test the waters again on this, and y'all let us know what y'all think about this format. We'll do some different stuff in the future and try to touch on some different topics. And yeah, we'll just continue to figure it out.
I think it sounds like a lot of fun. I love hearing from other people, but I think every now and then doing a deep dive into something as far as history or tactics or whatever is going to be just a really fun way to talk about the Ozarks. So we are the Ozark podcast, so it makes sense.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about the Ozarks.
Absolutely.